Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of CloudBites Conversations, where I'm really interested and really lucky to have someone joining me today who's actually spoken to me on their podcast before. It's nice to be kind of sat on the other side of the table. This person's a well-known Salesforce developer, podcaster, obviously, as I mentioned, and is going to tell us about some of the interesting projects they're working on and some of their background today. So welcome to the podcast, Xi Xiao.
Hello, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure to be sitting with you here.
Oh, thank you for joining us. It's been a while since I was on the SalesforceWay podcast a few years back, so it's nice to catch up again. And it's hopefully we'll get to see each other at an event more sooner rather than later as well. It's
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit interesting to me as well to turn the table and sitting on the other side. But let's see. Let's see.
You'll be good. I know we had this when Jeffrey was on not that long ago. Jeffrey Bessereau, from the SFXD. He was the same. He was saying the same thing. He was like very used to asking people questions, not used to being asked them. So, but this is more of a conversation anyway. So it's not going to be a big grilling. So we'll be good. Give people a little bit of a flavor of your background. How did you get started in Salesforce? Yeah, how did you begin working in Salesforce? How did you make it to Finland as well? Because obviously you're based in Finland at the moment. Yeah, so give us a little bit of a flavor of your story.
Yeah, well, maybe just quickly is originally Chinese and come to Finland for study. Like almost 20 years ago. So it's quite some time, based in Finland already, and has been in the Salesforce ecosystem for over 8 years already, and has always been a Salesforce developer. So that's basically what I have at the moment, learning a bit other programming languages, exploring some other things, AI related stuff. Just what really strikes my fancy, then I just tend to spend a bit more time on those stuff. I don't exactly know what I'm doing, but I'm just following my interests.
That's the good way.
Yeah.
It's the best way to learn, is just to follow your interests and follow your passions.
Yes. But you also asked how I started in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
I think it's quite a simple story. I wanted to be a programmer like 2018, but I couldn't really land a decent job at the time because I didn't have I was never being a paid developer in the past before that. So it's really kind of difficult at the time to get a paid job as other like a technology stack. And Salesforce, I had some background when I was working in a big company. So I think that's the easier job for me to start a Salesforce developer. So I joined as a consultant at the time.
Cool. Yes. And so was your background computer science then, or what was your background?
Yes, thanks for asking. I did have a computer science background, but for me, it's like I didn't really spend much time to think what I wanted in life in the past, and I never wanted to be a programmer, to be honest, even though I have a strong IT background. So I was just like, hey, I'm working in the IT industry. I get some salary paid. I can eat some bread. Then that's good enough. And but after some while, I think I started to really get into programming. I enjoy it. So then I started to think, hey, why not? Right? So why not to find a job as a programmer? So that's where things started.
So what did you want to be then if you didn't want to be a programmer originally? We had Peter Chittum on not that long ago, and I didn't know this about Peter. I've known Peter for a long time, but I didn't know this about him, but he was a theatre major.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he wanted to be an actor, and so which is very different to being a Salesforce developer, although as a consultant, occasionally we've all put on an act in front of clients to make them feel comfortable. So what was it you wanted to be? Was it did you want to be rocket scientist or an actor or what was it?
I, to be honest, I really didn't know. I was just like a stupid person, like I don't know what I want. I get paid, and I'm happy. That's it. I may just play games. I may just hang out with friends. I didn't have like a clear idea, like what professions I want to hold in my
Mm.
career. I don't even pay much attention what's a career path. So I think I was totally like clueless at the time.
Okay, cool. It's interesting because I think most people that, in fact, I'm pretty sure everyone that I've interviewed on the podcast has said that they
Hmm.
didn't intend. No one sat down and gone, "I'm going to be a Salesforce developer. That's what I want to do." I don't think anyone's done that yet.
Hmm.
But it's really interesting. I know from myself, I wasn't intending to be a developer or programmer either, or go into IT. I had done that before and had got experience programming, and even as a paid programmer as a teenager. But I only ended
Okay.
up going back into development because well, I was planning on being a banker and going and working in the financial services industry because I have a maths background.
Was it because
And
the money or the
yeah,
interest?
I'll be very upfront. Like mine was the money. I wanted to, I wanted to go away and I wanted to get £1 million bonus and like do that for 5-10 years, get a ton of money, and then disappear off somewhere. And I graduated just as the financial crash was happening. So um,
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot of banking jobs because there were there, in fact, was a decreasing number of banks, let alone banking jobs. Um, and so, yeah, so I ended up sort of falling back into programming, which is what I'd done beforehand, and managed to land a job. And excuse me, the rest, as they say, is history. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's really I don't think until recently Salesforce developer has been a career path, or Salesforce admin, or Salesforce whatever has been a career
Hmm.
path. Many people have gone, I'm going to go down that route. It
Yeah.
is always interesting.
But now you started your own company. I guess you didn't want to go to the bank role anymore, or do you?
I think I had left it a bit late. I mean, when you're in your late 30s, trying to suddenly, I mean, do you know what? Late 30s, you can pivot careers. You can do whatever you want. I think I think my decision to start running my own things was just that I'd made my way up in multiple companies and had helped multiple companies get built.
Hmm.
So, the past three roles I've had have all been building up companies and teams to get from a few people up to a larger number of people. I built one European team from three of us to 30 of us. I built, Cloud Galacticos. I helped build that organization up from seven of us to about 35 of us. You know, I've done a lot of building, and so I was just ready to try and do something on my own that was my own thing and try and go for it.
Hmm.
I like business. I like doing all of the different things. Like as you said a minute ago, kind of following where your passion is and being involved in stuff. But
Right.
yeah,
Especially when you have practiced it in the past, you naturally, take the next step to start your own company.
exactly.
Makes
I
sense.
mean, let's
Yeah.
let's be clear. There are days when I occasionally dream about farming goats somewhere on a hill, or you know,
Of course,
I,
of course. Everybody has that.
It was I one of the jobs I had when I was younger was
Hmm.
as a member of the ground staff at an organisation, and so looking after like football pitches and cricket pitches and all of these things. And it was just one of the best jobs ever because all we were out doing was mowing some grass and picking some litter and just like lots of little odd jobs, and then it be the end of the day
Yeah,
and
okay.
I'd go home, and that was it. Like it gets sort of 5 o'clock, and I'm done. And 5:04, there was nothing in my head. I wasn't sat there at home going like, I need to finish cutting the outfield tomorrow. All the grass is like no, it was just brilliant. So I do occasionally think of those sorts of times, but I
Yeah.
think one of the things that you do as you get older is you know the type of person you are, and I'm not that kind of person. So I
Mm,
uh,
yeah.
I like
But
having things going on in my head all the time. So
yeah.
with yourself then, so as you mentioned, you kind of started. started doing programming more and started finding you were enjoying it more and wanting to make more of a career out of it. And so I know you've worked at a couple of partners, and you now freelance, aren't you, as well yourself? So you
Yes,
kind of do your
I
own thing.
am.
Do
Yeah.
you enjoy being freelance more and having a bit more flexibility to decide what you work on?
Yes, definitely. It was a bit risk at the time, but I take the leap. It
Yeah.
was like, okay, I end the current job that was like working in a consulting company, and then I didn't know what's the next. Like
Hmm.
if I started my own company, what would be my next customer? But I was really lucky. I didn't have any time gap. I just
Hmm.
get the old customer who knew me and then hired me back. So I didn't have any transition time. I instantly go back to that customer. But it was a bit risky, but I took the chance. I said, hey, I just, why not to try it out? And the worst thing is after a couple months, I didn't get the job. Then I go back to one of the old consulting companies I worked in the past. So that
Yeah.
was the decision, and I never looked back. I enjoy the freedom, especially. I think it's really fitting me at least.
No, I know what you mean. It's nice to be able to kind of turn things down if you don't want to do a particular thing or decide to focus on another thing. I think
Yeah.
one of the things you kind of hit on there that I was talking to someone about the other day is the importance of network. And they were
Mm.
saying to me about, um, I think the article will be out by the time this podcast comes out. But I was talking for a Salesforce Ben article about the job market
Hmm.
for technical architects and senior people.
Okay.
And I was asked about, excuse me, about how much hunting do I do for work, and do I just get a phone call where someone says, Paul, we want you, we really need you, and it's that's not the way it works. But I did say that you do get people reach out to you after you've been working in the ecosystem for a while and you built a network.
Mm.
But I was reiterating that I think one of the most important things people need to remember is that everyone has a network. Okay, there are those of us that release podcasts and videos or newsletters or whatever, and make a lot of noise on LinkedIn and do all these things, and that's great if you want to build that kind of network. But for anyone as long as you're working with any people, whether it's in a company as a freelancer or whatever, the people you work with is your network, and it's really
Right.
important to do good work for them, to have good relationships and to build those good relationships, because as you just mentioned there, it's one of those things that it allows you to take that risk. And if something does go wrong, if they know, like, oh, she's done great work before for us, like, you haven't burnt any bridges, you can always go back. And I think that there's a really important lesson in that.
Yep. And this is especially true when we are in a small like country in Finland.
Mm,
Like everybody almost knows everybody in the Salesforce small ecosystem here in the country. And then maybe the next month you will run into another old coworker who is like your next customer who pay your salaries. You never
mm.
really know. And definitely you should, when you're taking the role, you get paid, just do your things right, and cover your ass, and then you have a good responsibility and a good reputation. I think then later on life could be much easier.
Oh, definitely, no,
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. So one of the things you also are well known for is the SalesforceWay podcast and
Hmm.
video cast. So tell us a little about tell the audience a little bit about Salesforce Way, about why you started it, about the kind of other kind of guests you've had on there. For anyone, I'll put a link in the show notes to the Salesforce Way page and podcast. And if you're not a listener, definitely go and listen to it.
Hmm.
But yeah, so tell us a little bit about the podcast and why you started it.
Yeah, I mean, almost everything I did in the ecosystem is based on my own interests, to be
Mm,
honest. I start with that. But of course, I need to find the niche that benefits myself and also benefits others as much as possible. So I try to get this win-win. So podcast is one of the things I personally really enjoy listening. I learned a lot of things from that. And before joining the Salesforce ecosystem, I was hosting another podcast. So I had the experience. So when I started like 8 years ago in Salesforce, I just decided, hey, I want to, know more people, right?
Mhm.
Build the network and learn from others. And what I didn't have any experience, but I had time. I was young. I had time. So I just used my time and audio skills to start to connect with people, ask questions. Would they be interested in joining? And start to build the website and all the stuff. So slowly, just build the things up episode by episode. So that's where we started. But again, because I personally was really into the IT, the technology side, so it's more or less focused on the programming and technical architect, but also sometimes a bit soft skills. I think it's really important to have the communication skills for everyone. So basically, that's what this podcast started.
That's cool. That's cool. And
Yeah.
what was the podcast you ran before then? What was that about?
Yeah, that one was a one in Chinese language. Actually, it's like a different style, but it's still about programming. Because in China, there's a lot of programmers there as well. So I just talk with them and learn new stuff. Like at the time was Ruby, Python 2, and all the good old stuff. So it was fun too. Yeah, but
Oh,
English was like it wasn't my native, but I was like, hey, I want to challenge myself and learn a bit more. That's where it started.
I mean, the idea of doing a podcast in another language absolutely blows my mind. I can barely do it in English, let alone in any other language. So,
No, no, no. I mean, of course, it's not as good as all the native guys like you do, but I try my best to set the theme and also have some outlines of the questions, but still we try to flow as see how the emotion goes
yeah.
in the
So do
chat.
you
Yeah.
with the and I know this having been on the SalesforceWay podcast, but
Mm.
excuse me, do you with the podcast you try and be more organic like this, where it is more of a conversation, or do you try and have it more of an interview style? How do you think works best for yourself on the podcast?
Yeah, I always do like this. I want to listen to the guest and to really understand, to interpret his sayings, right? So if I can understand, probably the other audience can understand. I'm kind of like the bridge, the medium in the middle. If the guest can introduce the concept to me, I can follow up. Then my role is to make sure the other audience can easily grasp the idea. So I try to be fitting in there.
That makes sense. I agree. I think the approach I've always tried to take with this is for the person or people who are listening right now to
Mhm.
feel like they're another chair at the table. I don't want it to
Right, right.
be. I've never wanted it to be a here's a series of questions kind of back and forth. I've always wanted it to be a proper conversation because
Right.
I think when you do that as well, it's much easier to get people to share what they're excited about, what they're interested in as well, which is I think the key part.
Yeah, because you need to ask questions. Sometimes maybe the guest talks too fast because he's too into the talking, or he is too familiar with the topic already, right? He didn't know where to stop. But your idea is to slow it down, ask questions, to rewrote some stuff. So, and actually, it really helps me a lot to learn the new stuff. I mean, if I didn't host the podcast, I wouldn't really spend as much time to learn that topic, right? But by
Yeah.
doing this, then I learn much deeper. Uh, I think that's a really good thing for myself.
Oh, yeah. So, what would you say is the biggest thing you've learned from the podcast then?
Like two things I'm really enjoying at the moment. One is the editor called the NeoVim that I'm using daily, The other one is the Rust programming language I'm also practicing at the time. A lot of my spare time goes into that, both of them. And they both come from the guests of the SalesforceWay podcast. They introduced me what it is, and then, hey, I spent some time to pick it up, and then it really get my brain into that. So,
So what?
all
Yeah.
these things. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about learning Rust then, because I don't know any Rust, to be very clear.
It's quite fine. And
Yeah,
it's such a niche.
well, it's because I've always wanted to learn. Um, I do a lot of obviously I do a lot of work in Apex, a lot of work in JavaScript, but I've never really worked with Python or that side of things, which I kind of at some point should probably dive into a little bit. But Rust and Go have always really kind of tweaked my interest, but I've never really had enough time or a topic to do on it. Do you know what I mean? I think that part of it is with Node, it's very easy to be like, oh, I've got a use case for a Node.js server because
Right.
everything is a use case for a Node.js. Like I was doing something with
Yeah.
Peter and I are doing a CLI plugin for
Yeah, I saw
CSF
that.
CLI,
Yeah. Yeah.
and well, that's all. I mean, it's Node with TypeScript. All of these things are just JavaScript or TypeScript now, so it's very, very kind of easy to do. So yeah, both Rust and Go have really kind of tweaked my interest in the past, but I've never really dove into it. So what made you start diving into Rust, and what have you liked about learning Rust?
I think for myself, first of all, I have this IT background. It's really like computer science. It's really the courses were about operating systems, data structures, algorithms. Even though I didn't want to be a programmer, but I touched those arts. I know
Yeah.
it's fascinating for a lot of nerds like myself, I think. And then when I was doing the podcast in Chinese language, I also started to pick up some other languages that were popular. Like I mentioned, Rust, Ruby, Python, even Clojure at the time. So I started to know how programming is such a wide area. There are so many different languages we can pick up. And then I started to really explore a bit more of like the strong type of language, like Haskell, like more like academic areas. So there's a lot of really interesting things that covers the challenges in the programming language area that wasn't really solved well, like back in the old days, like the C language, Java language, because they were so old that a lot of things wasn't a big challenge at the time, but now it is. For example, concurrent programming. At the old times, concurrent wasn't such a big issue, but now because the computer is so fast, it's so easy to spin up multiple threads and then pull the things around. But now the Rust and the Go or Haskell, they really have the concept to simplify and facilitate these big challenges, and in the really smart ways. So I think that's really fascinating to myself. So I want to learn from those guys. Hey, how you did these things, and maybe I can use it or rewrite it in another language. So I studied, like these things. It's really interesting to myself.
So you mentioned there. So just for people who aren't as technical who might be listening, you mentioned
Mm.
there concurrency and threading. So can you just give us a brief overview of what you mean by concurrency and threading when it comes to programming? Like, what would an example be for that?
Okay. So, for example, in the modern computer, our CPU could easily have like multiple thread, multiple cores, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we write a program, like in Salesforce, usually it's just one single thread. It's an execution thread right from the beginning to the end. But since we have such a powerful computer, why not use multiple cores in the same time to split the task into different tasks, like subtasks, and do them in parallel if possible, and then combine them in the end to speed the things up. For example, I think in Apex, we also can run unit tests, the Apex test in parallel, if we define that feature, right? So that can speed our testing. It's a similar concept. So basically, it's how to help us to reduce the time, to squeeze the orange more. That's the basic idea. Yeah.
And so, if I was to say that it would be the idea is that you take a job, split it into multiple smaller jobs that can run in parallel, and then the
Right.
concurrency problem is really how do you bring those four or eight or whatever threads together back at the end so that they know when
Yes.
each other's finished and know how to work together. That's how
Yes.
concurrent programming is
Yeah.
that's the real challenge.
It is. It is.
Oh, cool. And
There's
so,
there's a whole lot of like theme underneath that. The concept seems simple. You just split, then you join at the end. But
yeah,
how do you split? How do you share the memories? How do you make sure there's no security issues, right? When multiple threads write into the same memory or read the same memory, what are the concerns? So there are a lot of designs which has been in the programming language, it has been always the challenge in there. In the past, like for the C language, we heard a lot of bugs, like the memory overflow bugs. If somebody ever heard about that, like the infamous bugs there.
yeah.
But those things actually come from like the modern languages like Go or Rust tend to really help on that to reduce the bug of those kinds.
Cool. So you've been playing with languages like Rust, and so is that one of the things I know you've been playing with as well is SF NeoVim, which I think
Mm.
you've been building and working on. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about SF NeoVim. Then is SF NeoVim done in Rust, or is it separate to? Is it
Okay.
not using your Rust skills?
Yeah. So a bit background is that I think most of our Salesforce developers are using VS Code as the code
Hmm.
editor, but there are other choices as well, right? In the past, we had this Java-based Eclipse, right? And now we also have the Illuminate Cloud plugin in what is it? IntelliJ, right?
Yeah.
So we have all the choices. So NeoVim is one of the choices. So it's based on the Vim editor. It's like a dialect of a Vim editor, and it uses Lua script language basically
Okay.
to automate things. So the sf.mvim is basically a Lua plugin for the editor to do the Apex or Salesforce related programming features.
Oh, cool.
Mm.
And so what made you start writing SF NeoVim? What?
Because I need it, right? Again, it's my personal interest. I started to pick up the NeoVim editor, but at the time there wasn't really a good development environment.
Mhm.
Like Illuminated Cloud for IntelliJ, we have Scots there
Yeah.
supporting it. It was so good, and VS Code we have the official plugin in VS Code. Everybody can just freely use that. But at the time, wasn't any really good plugin, so I decided to build it by myself.
So I'm going to ask why did you start playing with NeoVim then? Because I many moons ago used VI and Vim, but it was like
Yeah,
at least
these.
15 years ago.
I mean, these things always go. It's a bit. I mean, there's a history here, right? Like Vim and Emacs are like the always like the two editors that people
Yeah.
enjoy, and then there are these modern editors like the VS Code, or in the past there are other ones, but the old ones are always has its seat no matter how the
Yeah.
time passes. So so I enjoy, a lot of other people enjoy, because you can easily customize, and there are different layers of complexities you can really do with it. I know it's not easy to pick up, but once you pick it up, it's like your personal tool that it's really tailored for yourself. So you can use all the hotkeys to do whatever things you decided to let it do for yourself.
Oh, cool. And so the plugin then, is it plugging into the SF CLI directly, or are you
Yes.
plugging? Okay,
Yes.
so how does that work? Is it just calling out to the CLI from your plugin, or?
Yeah, actually, Salesforce has this really great idea to have the CLI tool, the SF CLI. All the things actually is on that layer. It's really a fundamental layer. All the other editors can just use it if they want, right? It's just a matter of different commands. So because of that, I had the chance to just to call the commands, the SF CLI commands. For example, to pull the Apex metadata files or push metadata files to org. So I kind of have the NeoVim features, and then I have the SF CLI. I just write the plugin to merge, glue them together. So basically, that's what the plugin does.
Oh, nice, cool. And so, because the plugin's been going out, I think you've had it out for about a year. Is that right? Maybe for longer.
Yeah, I think it has. I don't exactly remember, but it definitely has been more than a year or something. Yeah, there were some people starting using it because it's still such a niche in our ecosystems. For example, in Finland, I don't see any developers, Salesforce developers, using NeoVim at all. I have some friends who said they want to pick it up, but they never really pick it up.
Yeah.
I don't blame them, but it's just the truth.
So do you use it day in day out as your tool of choice, or do you still use VS Code a little bit, or do you use something different like Cursor, or yeah?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I use NeoVim as much as possible. Cursor is something just because it has the AI feature that NeoVim or other editors doesn't really catch up that easily. But I still like waiting to see what's going on there. But I use the web browser like a GPT for the coding part, so I don't really have to integrate in the feeding of everything together. To me, it's always like this. I always consider it like this. If we are a professional developer, we need to hone our tool, and the NeoVim is one of the tools I'm honing. So it's kind of incremental improvement because you have your configurations, you save in the GitHub every day. You can improve a little bit, and then after quite some time, then it becomes really powerful and really automated, and it's in your muscle memory. Like for myself, I rarely really use mouse to click things around, so I always have the keyboard. It's really fast and efficient for myself. It follows my brain in a sense.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think one of the things, I'll be honest, one of the things I find difficult sometimes with, I think there's a purity around having a very simple editor with a lot of stuff removed, almost, for want of a phrase. Because I find that like Copilot and agents, and I find they just get in the way a lot. The number of times I'm sat there trying to type something and it's just making suggestions like, no, you're wrong. You're really wrong. Please just get out
Yes.
of the way though and stop being
Yes.
a pain.
Yeah.
It's So I think that there's definitely a purity in having a tool that you're working with that you've designed and sort of tailored for yourself, and can have that without having this annoying, because I think one of the problems with AI stuff at the moment is, particularly in Salesforce, is it's not brilliant. It's good, but it's not brilliant. And contextual, and I think one of the real problems I have is that contextually it's really bad. Like the the knowledge of the field names and the types of the fields and things like that. And it's literally like having a small child sometimes, just constantly. Do you mean this? Do you mean this? Do you mean this? And you're like, no, just shush a
Yeah.
minute. Let me tap away. I can definitely see the appeal of not having that going on all the time as well.
Yeah. AI is such a hot topic nowadays for everyone. But I still think for us, when we use AI to do the coding, we still need to have the skill to understand what they are doing, at least in certain levels, right? We have to be the judge, to, like what you said, you need to know whether it does a good job or not. Is it a pure hallucination that it tends to be really good at it, but it's like all the bullshit?
Yeah.
So you really need to know that. If you are just a guy who are like a junior, you didn't understand it, then it's really easy to get lost there. So,
I
but
think
I
it's,
see it's improving all the time, which is also good.
yeah, I think one of the things, I read this interesting article today, which I'll put a link to in the show notes. It's by
Mhm.
Dylan Beattie. Um,
Okay.
and Dylan Beattie is a .NET developer who's been around the block for a few years. You know, he's good old school solid .NET developer and helps people build up, you know, proper solutions. And
Mm.
he wrote this, and I'm paraphrasing his article terribly, but he wrote about vibe coding and the problem with it. And he was saying that one of the things that you and I both know that we do as, I'm going to say, sort of more old school developers, or you know, and for anyone who's a Salesforce programmer or developer, forgive me for this, but I'm going to make terrible generalizations. I think there are most Salesforce developers do not write scripts for their use. Like I am still the sort of person that will occasionally. I had a requirement the other week to get down. Someone wanted an export of every object with all their fields, the descriptions of them, and everything in a CS, in like an Excel file. They wanted a data dictionary. Now
Mm.
I was like, oh, that's a pain. But I sat there, and in an hour, I'd found a couple of like node plugin, yeah, node modules, and I was like, okay, great. I can query the metadata. I can run a query. I can get all the metadata down as a format. I can then output
Mhm.
it as tabs in a sheet, and I got it, and I could save it. And it about an hour's work, but it let me press it, and it got me 250 objects and all the various fields out like that, and it was brilliant.
Mhm.
That is a script, and that
Right.
script is on my machine because every time I ran it, the first few times it's like error, okay, and then you do that thing of like, and then you fix that error, then you go run again and go, yeah, and it doesn't look polished because all it does is you press run and then it sits there for 5 seconds and then you get an Excel file and that's it. Like there's no interactivity, no usability, nothing.
Yeah.
And excuse me. And one of the things I think that's really interesting about that is that, and what Dylan was saying is that there are a lot of older school programmers out there, but a lot of programmers that I think in general away from the Salesforce space who write scripts like that that are programs or scripts, which let's be clear, ChatGPT could probably do that, as could Claude or any of these others. It can produce you that thing. There is a
Mhm.
difference between that though and a product. And when you're building something as a product, you need to deal with errors, you need to deal with a nice feedback system, you need to deal with internationalization and what location does it come in, and do you have permissions, and do you, because you know, I got a permissions error at one point. I was like, great, I know what to do. Sudo run, do it, like, which is a terrible practice. But I could, it's
Mhm.
my laptop, I can run it as super user for like 2 seconds. Um, but he wrote this, and this is, it's a really short but very good article where he mentions things like authentication, like concurrency, like billing and telemetry, and all of these things in there that are a product level that you don't have in your little programs and test scripts. And I think that it's a really interesting view of it, where to kind of jump on what you're saying is that you need to have that knowledge and understanding of what it's doing when it gives you code. Because if you want to take that code and just run it as a one off script, if you want it to write a SQL query or a SOQL query, it's going to do it brilliantly and you can just take it and run it and it'll be fine.
Mm.
If you want to write something that an end user is ever going to use, then you need to really know what you're doing to sit there and go, okay, what are the security implications? Well, is this internationalized? Does it make sense? Is there an edge case that's going to blow up on here? All of those things, that the stuff that humans think about, a computer doesn't. And I think that that's a really important thing and differentiator. And as you say, is where you need that kind of understanding of things.
Yeah. and you definitely need to have the experience. You have to have done a product in the past. You have passed all those barriers. Then you understand the things. For example, like Paul, you are doing. I think in your company you're building different Apex exchange products. There are definitely a lot of other things under the surface that the people you don't understand, right? But there's a lot of struggling has happened, and you tackle them.
I mean, like my app is not an overly cleverly. My app sends messages. It sends text messages, WhatsApp messages, and like Violet messages. It is not like there's not a secret clever algorithm I've got in there that's like patentable and worth millions. But what I've done is, and what it does do well is it helps you. It's things like having that error handling, having that like notification system, having that. That's the bit where it's like it's having components so you can use it properly, having invocable actions and all that stuff. So yeah, it's but yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing, as you say, just about that idea of understanding that there's a difference between a script and or a program and a product, and even I think being the difference between a programmer and a developer almost sometimes as to what you're doing.
There are so many layers of learnings you can do, even with a really small idea to productalize it, right? You are building a foundation maybe from a small software which can grow in the future into a much bigger with much bigger audience, but then there are a lot of things to cover, like how to write tests, to cover your production code, how to do the error handling, how to automate the things as much as possible, the GitHub actions, you need to learn those things. So there are really a lot of things to do. And actually, Salesforce has simplified it so much for us, right? When we are doing it in the cloud. Even the database, we don't really need to touch that much.
No, exactly. So one of the other things then that followed on from your work with NeoVim and what you were doing on NeoVim was your Apex formatter, AFMT. So can you give us a little bit of a flavor as to what AFMT is and kind of why you started writing your own Apex formatter and what even an Apex formatter is, perhaps? Because there'll be some of our listeners here that are on the more functional side that have no idea what a formatter is for a programming language.
All right. So when we write the programming language, it has the syntax. It's a plain text, but it has syntax. And the syntax, actually, you want to make it format nicely for human beings to read. And actually, the code format is mainly for that purpose. So no matter how you put the spaces, you multiple empty lines between some text, so then you hit the button, then it's supposed to really format it nicely for you. Just like when you write in the book, in the paper, then you can put the chapters, nicely indented, something like that. So that's what the format does. So if you are a programming like you are a programmer, Salesforce programmer, probably you have used the prettier Apex, like the DOM has developed. So I think that's the de facto Apex formatter for us in the ecosystem. So that's one of the best tools.
And so AFMT is another Apex formatter then. Why did you write AFMT? Why have you put together another Apex formatter?
Yeah, again, it's for my own interests. I just wanted to write it, and of course, there are some pain points when I was using the pretty Apex. It's a bit slow, and you need to install, like what you said, the node. You need to install the prettier plugin, and you have to tweak the things. And frankly speaking, when the Apex file is over several thousand lines, then it becomes really laggy. Take like several seconds to really format to get the result. And I was just thinking, hey, how hard could it be to write a formatter? Well, let me try. Then I start to dig. Then it was like 5 months later, then I almost finished it.
How hard can it be?
Yeah, how hard can it be? Yes.
That's a great impression. Great
Yeah.
way of looking at it. It's, also, have you ever seen that sign? We did this not because we thought it, not because it was easy, but because we thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
at the time, I think I have all the support. I was chatting with Dan, the Pretty Apex author, and I was chatting with Anthony, who is the Apex parsers author. It's like a three-seater Apex parser. For people who don't know what the parser is the format actually needs to use the parser. So parser is like the prerequisite. So once you have the parser, then you can write the formatter. Otherwise, you need to write both by yourself. So at that time, Anthony has already made a really good parser for me. And even if along the journey when I write the AFMT, I have requested multiple times that he could update his parser to facilitate my work. You have this kind of synergies there. He can really nicely support you. That's really wonderful.
Oh, cool. That's good. That is good. I mean, so is it is AFMT written in Rust or is it?
Yeah, it is written in Rust. No surprise, right?
No. Well, it's good to have a use case as we were kind of saying earlier on. Like when you're trying to learn something new, having a thing you want to build in it is a good way of
Yeah,
understanding and getting going on.
I think writing in Rust is not just my interests. I think it really shines out to write the CLI tools using Rust. Because first of all, it's a system programming language. It's really similar to C or C++, which means it's really fast when you write the code in a good way. It's really super fast. And also, it's really strong typed language. It handles the error really elegantly. So it's just a perfect language for CLI tools. And since I wanted to write it, and I see Pretty Apex was a bit slow in my terms, then I start to just tackle it, in Rust.
Nice. Is Rust one of those that I'm just looking to see whether it's supported on Heroku and things as well or not? Yeah, I think there's a build pack, but I don't think there's an official one. Let's have a look.
Okay.
Because no,
I
it
don't.
does seem a cool
Mm.
language to be playing. Image Magic, CLI. Yeah, I can't see one on there, but there must be one on there. I'm sure. Surely. There's no search on the build pack list, which is interesting. Anyway, so that's cool. So one of the things that I think kind of shines through in what we've been discussing is you following that kind of that path of what are my interests, what I want to do, and scratching your own itches and things like that. So one of the things I think would be fair to say is that a lot of what you've done is based upon what you're passionate about and finding things that interest you. So would you agree that that's been kind of a guiding principle, and do you think that's very important in terms of building a career and spending time doing things that you find interesting for you, and not just paying the bills as you mentioned?
I totally agree with this idea. It's almost my guiding principle in my life nowadays. I also totally agree. Like when I started my career in Salesforce at the beginning, everybody needs to earn bread, right? So
Yeah,
you have to get paid. If you don't get paid, then why you don't have this luxury to say, hey, I have the passion to do something open source without pay. So we definitely need to have that baseline. And once we have the baseline, we can take the time. You have the time luxury now, so that you can slowly to build the things up and follow
yeah,
your passion. And it's not easy to find to what you want to do in life. I was like clueless, as I said, like 30 years in my life, and finally find out what I want to do. But after that, once you have a clear goal, I think things become much easier. You just heads down, dash forward. follow your passion and move forward.
So how would
That's
you
how I see it.
would you have any advice for people that are in that position that you were, where they're not sure what that passion is and not sure what they want to do or where they would want to go?
Just sit with yourself and spend a lot of time to figure out what you want to do. There's no shortcut, at least not to me. The good thing in Finland is that it's a small country and the people don't tend to have any relationship one with another. It's like atomic society. You never really see your neighbors. In Finland, it's like when the neighbor opens the door, you don't go out. You wait until your neighbor moved away, then you go out. So that's a bit exaggerations, but indeed, when you don't have this and like you spend the time with yourself to figure out, then you start to pick up the feeling, the momentum. I think. I don't know. For myself, I listen to podcasts, I read books. Especially like the philosophical books, start to kind of to figure out how people are thinking about what's the life of the meanings. Okay, so these people, like several thousand years ago, they already started to pick up these ideas, and me now I started to follow up and try to understand what they did. So these things are interesting to myself.
Would you have any particular books or things that you'd recommend people pick up? Is there a particular favorite?
I do not. I mean, of course, it's really hard. I mean, the different people really have different flavors, and different people have different backgrounds. Some books are really hard to recommend, like Plato or Aristotle, like these old philosopher books. I slowly pick them up, but to myself, I enjoy listening to some podcasts, and they explain what these
Mm.
wisdom guys did. So that helped me as the bridge to understand the knowledge they have. So I can't really read the philosopher's original book because it was too hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people still need to explore. I can't really recommend. There are
Well,
maybe some Chinese old books I can recommend, but that needs the language as well,
okay.
unfortunately. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I
Mm.
Yeah, no, I think if someone was listening to this and was trying to figure out um, what they want to do and was looking for that advice, I think what you've said about spending time with yourself, thinking and kind of seeing what works for you, I think is important. I think the other thing is just trying things. It's
Yeah.
the one of the things that I think a lot of people perhaps don't appreciate enough nowadays is that there is so much you can do for free.
Mm.
There is an abundance of people putting stuff out there on YouTube and other areas and other channels. But if you want to start, if you want to learn how to program, and let's just say you're not doing Salesforce, let's just say you want to learn how to program Rust or Go or JavaScript or just want to learn the basics of it, as long as you have a laptop nowadays, you can get set up. And I think that
Mm.
there's something really fundamentally important that people need to remember about about doing that, and you're kind of just being aware that you can do that. You don't need permission to go away and you don't need to buy a course, you don't need to buy a book. You can just sit and play and try and watch a couple of videos and do that. One of the areas that I'm excuse me that I'd love to be better at is CSS, which is a really like CSS is
Seriously. Okay.
it's a dark art, isn't it? I mean, like, let's be clear.
Yeah.
Um, and I know how to write CSS. I have written a lot of CSS. But have you ever seen CSS battles?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and
I
so
have not seen. I've saw like Excel battles in Microsoft.
okay,
I didn't see like CSS battles.
for anyone who's not familiar with the concept, a CSS battle is there's a site where effectively you have a graphic, what looks like a graphic or a pattern or something you have to produce, but you have to produce it in just CSS. And CSS is cascading style sheets. It's the way in which every web page is styled. And there are level. What will happen is I will look at that design pattern that they've produced, and I'll be like, to make that, I would open up Photoshop or Illustrator, or like, I just wouldn't even try. Like, I'm just looking at
Yeah.
it, I'm like, how are you doing that? And then there'll be these guys that just sit there. They go, right, I'm going to do this gradient thing on a circle with this, and you're kind of trying to do it in the smallest amount, and it's just unbelievably clever. It's also really fast in terms of rendering and performance because CSS is a well understood thing for the browser. But yeah, but the point I'm trying to make on that is that there's also a lot of fun ways of doing things. So I I've been watching some of those videos on YouTube, which is a really sad thing to spend your like sort of Friday evening doing, is watching CSS YouTube videos, CSS battle YouTube videos.
No,
But
it's fun.
yeah,
It's totally fine. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But it's really really good. But it's a I think there's a lot of fun ways and interesting ways you can learn things as well. And if it's not something programmatic and it's not technical, and you just want to get better at formula fields, or you want to get better at data model design, or you want to get better at all these things, I think there's so much that is important to do, which is just play. Is to just play with a tool and mess around with it. And
Right.
that's, I think that's how I got started doing any sort of programming or any sort of stuff with computers. Is I just was wanting to play with it and play games, and then write
Yeah.
my own games and then play with them and things like that.
I think it definitely reflects back to your original questions, like follow your passion. Everybody really has different interests. Like you are into CSS, you maybe in the weekends you will watch YouTube videos like this. I would totally not doing this because CSS to me is really a disaster. I don't want to spend any of my time. I would just avoid that. But I accept it, right? Different people just have different things to do, and that's really good. And that's also to our audience. As a Salesforce developers, there are so many different types of Salesforce developers. You just follow the things that you want to learn. Like the LWC is one thing, ABEX one thing, integration with Salesforce platform is another thing. There's so many things you can be good at, and you just need one job, right? You don't need to be good at everything. Whichever fits you the best, then whichever topic you think weekends you will spend time watching the video to learn that, then that's your thing. I think that's important to really grasp that idea.
Definitely. And to be clear, the reason I watch those CSS videos is I find it mind blowing. My CSS is horrific. My CSS is a war crime in many areas. It's terrible CSS. And have you seen the meme of Peter Griffin with the blind? There's a
I
meme of Peter Griffin pulling
Okay.
like a concertina blind, like that you pull up, and so it's
Okay.
him doing CSS, and kind of every time he pulls it up, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and
Okay.
that's me doing CSS for definite. Um, so
Yeah.
so we've covered so I think we've covered like a really good full circle there of how you got started and how your passion kind of helped you get into development and helped you get into Salesforce, and the work you've done with NeoVim, the SF NeoVim, the work you've done with AFMT, and the work you kind of continue to do. So
Mhm.
so I suppose the question is, what's next for you? What are you going to be working on now? What do you want to be working on in the future? That's kind of your that is igniting your passions currently.
I think what I want to do is still to write the backend programs. So I'm not really into the front ends, like
Mm-hmm.
CSS, for example. Yeah, because to me the backend has more designs and algorithms, efficiencies, and easier to test comparing to front end. So these things actually makes me feel more efficient. So I'm really more into those stuff. Be it Rust or Apex or other language, that doesn't really matter. But But there's a lot of things I can learn. Rust is one of the languages that are really hard to pick up, actually, comparing to all the other ones I've learned in the past. Especially like a Go is a really easy language, but Rust isn't. But it has so many dimensions and the layers of learning those good stuff. Then I just take my time to pick things up. I never really haste, in a sense, to learn those things. And whenever I have a chance to do some other jobs, maybe I will take it. But so far so good. I'm still enjoying. Like my daily life is my daily job is doing Apex language, and then in my spare time I do a bit of Rust, a bit of everything. Yeah. I don't have a clear plan like you do. Like I don't really want to be entrepreneur in a sense, even though I have my own company and like a one-man solo company doing my stuff. But I'm happy with my life, so I'm content with it.
That is a brilliant ending. The words "I'm happy with my life and very content." That's a brilliant ending. So, thank you so much for joining us, Xi. I suppose the one last question I do have is,
Okay.
I like to ask to see if you've got one bit of advice or one tip that you would give to the listeners that they could take away as an action they could do today. I know we've covered a lot of things about finding your passion, about playing and learning through play, about scratching your own itches is obviously a big one for yourself with NeoVim, with AFMT. So yeah, what would, if you had one tip or one bit of advice to finish up on, what would it be?
Yeah, I think we discussed people would follow their passion, but I also maybe to add on top of that is that no matter learning whatever topic you are learning, it always takes a lot of time if you want to be good at it. No matter it's programming, communication skills, whatever is your profession or your hobby, playing games included. So it's really hard. Just be patient and give it time to hone your skills. So that's really concrete and important. It will support you. And also the AI nowadays really does a good a teacher role. It can plan a lot of things for you. So you just need to follow it if you enjoy learning with AI together.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you once again so much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
Paul.
I've loved catching up with you again. Thank you so
Yep.
much, everyone, for listening. Please remember to give it a like if you've enjoyed the episode and to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for this CloudBites conversation, Xi.
Thanks a lot, Paul. See you next time. Bye-bye. Take
Cheers.
care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.